At 40 degrees below zero, steel becomes brittle, engines refuse to start, and human skin freezes in minutes. Blood turns thick, wounds harden like ice. Men fall asleep and never wake again. In the frozen mountains of North Korea, in November of 1950, thousands of American Marines and soldiers found themselves trapped in a nightmare that no training manual could prepare them for. They were surrounded by an enemy that outnumbered them several times over. Cut off from supply lines, miles from safety, with winter itself acting as a silent, merciless weapon. The world believed they were finished. The enemy believed they were finished. But what unfolded at the Chosin Reservoir would become one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of American endurance, discipline, and courage ever recorded in military history. The Korean War was still young, and many believed it was already nearing its end. United Nations forces had pushed North Korean troops back toward the Chinese border. Confidence was high. But unseen and largely undetected, massive Chinese forces were moving through the mountains under cover of darkness. In late November, more than 100,000 Chinese soldiers launched a sudden and devastating counteroffensive. They attacked at night, moving silently through snow-covered ridges, surrounding isolated units before dawn. When the Americans realized the scale of the assault, it was already too late. At the Chosin Reservoir, the U.S. 1st Marine Division, alongside U.S. Army units and Allied forces, was encircled deep in hostile territory. Escape routes vanished. Communication lines were strained, and the temperature continued to drop. The cold was unlike anything most of these men had ever experienced. Weapons jammed solid. Mortars cracked when fired. Trucks froze in place. Medical morphine became unusable. Bandages froze to open wounds. Frostbite crippled men faster than enemy bullets. Marines slept sitting up because lying down meant death. Yet despite the physical torment, discipline held. Command structures remained intact. Units did not dissolve into panic. Instead, they dug in, established defensive perimeters, and prepared to fight in conditions that bordered on the inhuman. Chinese forces launched relentless attacks, often in massive waves, blowing horns and whistles to signal their advance through the darkness. They believed sheer numbers would overwhelm the Americans. What they encountered instead was coordinated fire, artillery support, and unbreakable defensive lines. Marines fought hand-to-hand when ammunition ran low. Medics treated the wounded under direct fire, often working barehanded in sub-zero temperatures. Supplies were dropped from the air, sometimes landing in enemy positions, sometimes shattering on impact from the cold. Still, the Americans held. Not because conditions favored them, but because surrender was never considered an option. As the situation grew more desperate, one narrow mountain road became the only possible route to survival. Along that frozen path, the Marines executed what would later be recognized as one of the greatest fighting withdrawals in history. This was no retreat. Every movement forward required clearing enemy positions, securing ridge lines, and defending convoys under constant attack. Bridges destroyed by the enemy were replaced with air-dropped sections assembled under fire. The wounded were carried, not abandoned. The fallen were recovered whenever possible. Unit cohesion never collapsed. Leadership never failed. The Marines advanced not away from the enemy, but directly through them. For 17 brutal days, the fighting continued without relief. Sleep came in minutes, not hours. Food froze solid. Men fought with frozen faces, frozen hands, frozen expressions locked in determination. By the time the Americans reached the port of Hungnam, they had inflicted massive losses on the Chinese forces and preserved the core of their fighting strength. What the enemy intended to be a decisive annihilation became instead a strategic failure. The Americans evacuated in good order, bringing with them not only their troops, but thousands of refugees who would otherwise have been left behind. The Battle of Chosin Reservoir was not a victory measured in captured ground or enemy flags. It was a victory of survival, discipline, and honor. It proved that American forces could endure conditions that would have destroyed most armies. It demonstrated the power of leadership under pressure and loyalty between men who refused to leave one another behind. Military historians would later agree, Chosin was not a defeat. It was a breakout, achieved against impossible odds. Today, the Korean War is often called the Forgotten War, and within it, Chosin is too often reduced to a single line in history books. But for those who understand what truly happened there, Chosin stands as a defining moment in American military history. In the frozen mountains of North Korea, surround.